What's up, everyone? Roy here, and you are listening to the Clemenz with a Z podcast. In today's episode, we're going to dive deep into another powerful story in our ongoing series. We were in a cult. Joining me is former member Jocelyn, and she's here to share a deeply personal journey about her time with the International Church of Christ, or ICOC, a church that we all know has sparked devotion, admiration, and controversy over the years. Now, Jocelyn recounts how she was first invited in a mall, the experiences that kept her involved, and the moments that made her start questioning if she had unknowingly become part of something much more complex and even harmful. We're tackling the powerful and sometimes uncomfortable question of what defines a cult and how faith, community, and control can sometimes blur together. Whether you've had a similar experience or are just curious about how these dynamics play out in real life, this episode will give you a raw and honest look at the impact these groups can have. The candid conversation is going to explore the fine line between faith, community, and control, and will offer a unique perspective on what it means to be a part of a religious group that some might label a cult. Whether you're familiar with the ICOC or simply curious about the complexities of faith based organizations, this episode will provide valuable insights into Jocelyn's lived experiences. So let's get into it. Right, we're live. Hey, Jocelyn.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for being here, for adding your story to this growing conversation. So let's
Thank
jump
you.
right in.
Okay.
How'd you get involved in the ICOC?
Uh, I was actually randomly invited on the street right outside the mall. I was just at the movies with one of my best friends in high school, and we were waiting for her dad to pick us up. And some random woman who I later found out, had just come out of the teen ministry, was, one of the teen workers, um, invited us to church. So yeah. um,
Invited at the mall.
Invited at the mall. Yes, invited at the mall.
Yeah,
And
that is
yeah,
that is as you
so
said, it was so 90s when you
yes,
told me that before.
yeah, yeah. Yes, it was. Yeah, and I had not really been involved in church, so I thought like why not? Let's check this out.
Mhm.
Asked my parents and first well told them and they were like someone invited you to church. That's kind of weird, but they trusted me. I was 16. I think I had already had my license, was, working and things like that. So they let me go. And I remember this woman, so not even the woman who met me, but her roommate was now the team leader. And she was the one who was going to pick me up for church. So I was like getting in a car, going with someone I totally didn't know, and went to church. And my best friend was supposed to come too, and she canceled like that morning, like 10 minutes before this woman was supposed to pick us up. And I still went. I was like, I'm going to go because, I'm a person of my word and whatever, I'm going to go. And I remember it was like in a high school, which I thought that's kind of weird. And I remember the first person I met, he was like a campus guy at the college that, was in the same town I lived in actually. And he like gave me a hug. And I was like, what's going on here? Um, you know, so that was kind of weird, but kind of nice, because it felt really warm and welcoming. Yeah. And then I also remember too the minister for that kind of region was away this particular Sunday. And so just probably like, a family group leader, a Bible talk leader or somebody, he was running the service and he proposed to his girlfriend, like in the service, like in his sermon. And I
Wow.
remember just being so like, oh my gosh, this church is like so loving and like this is like exactly what I want. Felt like, what I if if I was looking for anything spiritual, I don't know that I was necessarily, but when I found this, I was like, oh yeah, this is right. This is for me.
What a first experience in a church.
I know.
You know, you're being driven to by the teen leader. You get there, you know, you're hugged by campus guys. So that felt good. It didn't felt like at all just like
It
confusing or weird.
no, it didn't. I mean, it felt very, I natural, very welcoming, very different from the only other church I had experienced in my life was the Catholic Church. And so just so gravely different, but I never really felt very welcome in the Catholic Church because my parents weren't Catholic and, I didn't make my first communion. I didn't make my confirmation like all my other 16-year-old friends had. So I always felt like I didn't really belong there. So this felt like something, oh, like I could belong here because, I'm a kind, loving person. And like this is kind of, I don't know, sappy and that's right up my alley. Like Hallmark movies are my thing. So it felt a little, Hallmark movie ish. So
So your parents were not very religious growing, as you can
no,
remember.
not at all. I remember my mom saying, her only connection to a church was that her grandfather built or her father built a church, like physically was a carpenter. And my dad's parents were very Catholic, very Irish Catholic. And he just, once he was 18 and could make his own decisions, he never went again. And there was a lot of pressure, I remember, as a child from my grandmother to kind of do the Catholic thing. And my dad just, you know, I think I was christened maybe, but my parents were also very young when I was born. I think my parents were like 19 and 20 when I was born.
Mhm.
So by the time my sister and brother came around, my parents were kind of, grown ups and making their own decisions and didn't do that. But we lived across the street from a huge Catholic church that tons of my friends went to, and yeah, we never went. I mean, I would ride my bike and roller skate in the parking lot and play tennis off the wall, but we never went in that building ever. So
And so, did you know about quote unquote God or anything like that?
I mean, not really. Like I really was very naive
Hmm.
spiritually for sure. And if anything, the only, I would go to like Sunday school with my best friend when I would sleep over her house on weekends. Her dad was a like CCD teacher, and then we'd go to church after. And I remember for the longest time, they would all get up and get in line to like get communion. And I very, very distinctly remember this prayer saying, whatever it was. It was like, though I'm not worthy to receive you, I'll just say the words and I'll be healed. And it was like that was what people were supposed to say who couldn't take communion. So, if anything, my view of God was more like, I don't belong or I'm not worthy because I remember needing to say those words. And then I remember when I studied the Bible and being shocked that those words were not in the Bible or that communion, like in the sense of how it was practiced, that in the Catholic Church wasn't in the Bible. I was like, no, 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 it has to be in here because for so long I was unworthy. It's got to be here. And they were like, no, it's not here.
So,
um,
wow.
yeah.
And so they say that when you don't take communion or you're not a member of the church.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Wow.
like if you haven't made your first communion, and again, that's my limited understanding, but that was my understanding when I was, a teenager and a tween, and going to church and not being able to take communion because I hadn't made my first communion. Which I mean, I think most kids do it in like first or second grade in the Catholic Church, and I didn't. So
The rules
yeah,
and rituals and
yeah.
orders we put in place of people to try to get closer to a God. It's
Hmm.
it's bananas.
Right? Crazy.
Yeah. So so you're not, God and church isn't that part of your life, and then you join this church. And
Mm.
so was it pretty much after that first service you were like, I want to keep going, or was there reservations?
Yeah, I think a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure I consistently just went.
Hmm.
Pretty quickly, someone asked me to study the Bible, and there was like a teen Bible talk going on, like in the next town. So I started going to that and, you know, looking at the Bible for the first time. That was the other thing too that was interesting. Like I didn't realize that people could read the Bible. Like I thought it was just like the
Yeah.
people on the pulpit, you know, were the only ones, or like the priests were or whoever the special people were who got up to kind of do a small reading or something again, in the Catholic Church. But I didn't know that, 16-year-olds could read the Bible. I
Hmm.
like it. I didn't know that. I didn't have friends who were, kind of in a non-denominational Christian church. They were all like literally all my friends were probably Catholic, you know. So,
Hmm.
and they didn't read the Bible.
Yeah, and I
So,
don't think you bring your Bible to Catholic church, do you?
no.
Yeah.
No, I remember, my friend like having some kind of workbook, when she would go to CCD, but
Hmm.
it wasn't the Bible. It was just like a workbook. Yeah. So,
Wow. Yeah, I think that tracks. Um,
mm,
for a lot of things, it's even interesting how you go back. I think about that way back hundreds of years ago, and how the first book that was printed was the Bible, and the power that it gave people to read it, because back
yeah,
then not many people knew how to read, and
right,
your learning of the Bible was through, these priests.
right.
So so you're
Yeah,
seeing the
right.
Bible everywhere.
Yeah.
What did your parents think about you going to this church?
It's interesting. At first, they were like, great, have fun. Sometimes they would ask, what I learned or what they talked about or what have
Mhm.
you. But I think once I started like asking to go to like the Bible talks and then like Friday night devotionals and church on Sunday, my dad was kind of like, why are you doing this so much? Like, I need to know more about this. And then, when someone asked me to study the Bible, then that was also like different nights in there. And he just said, like, I don't like this. Like, this is too much. Something's not right. Again, in his mind, he grew up Catholic, and you went to church on Sunday, and maybe you went to CCD before that, but that was it. So this was very foreign to him. And I remember my team leader kind of meeting with my dad because my parents had zero desire to get involved. Meeting with my dad, and I was so nervous. I was like at Bible talk when this was happening or something. And I remember him coming back and just saying, we need to respect Jocelyn's father's wishes. Like, she's a minor, and which I'm very appreciative of. Um, but it was like my dad said, you can go to two things a week. So, you need to pick what are those two things you want to go to. And I remember even talking to my team leaders, and it was like, Bible talk was where my friends were, these group of kids familiar with. And it was something that, was kind of, I could bring my friends to from school, and then church on Sunday, So it was like I didn't go to the teen devos for a long time, or I would do my Bible studies like before, um, the Bible talk on Wednesday or whatever. So it was kind of like at the same time or right after or what have you. So I was, sticking to those two things a week for, I think, until I got baptized. So,
Wow. Well, good on your parents and that team leader for working through that, and,
yeah.
doing what a lot of people would think is the right and decent thing to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so what made you want to study the Bible and get baptized?
I think, I just wanted to know more,
Hmm.
um, because I felt very naive. I felt like, wow, all these people have this kind of knowledge or are experiencing God in a very different way than I am, and they're my peers, and some of them are younger than me. Like I might have been the oldest, if not close to the oldest, kind of teenager in that group. Um, and so, I felt like I gotta learn this stuff, and yeah, so I was just like, okay, well, like let's do it. I want to learn. And I did. I learned a ton, which is, great foundational information. And I seriously was super, super, super naive, not just naive in my understanding of God, but just like naive in life. I was
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm.
super, when my dad said, we don't do this, or when you ask to go somewhere, I expect you to be where you say you're going to be. And I really did follow the rules, you know? Um, so I remember being very enlightened, like when I did the sin study, like, and they kind of like went line by line by line of like various sins. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. I don't know what you're talking about. And I remember literally, I feel like they didn't believe me that I didn't know what masturbation was. Like they didn't believe me. Yeah.
Such that study in particular is such a like, we got to pull something out of you feeling,
Yeah. Right.
you know, you've
Like there has
got to
to be
see that
something
you're
you
a
need to,
bad person, you
hmm
know.
right.
But I
Like
mean,
you
if
need to be forgiven for something, right?
yeah, we can't just put you in the water if you haven't done anything. So let's find some things that you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That was enlightening.
did the studies feel like, besides like what you're saying here about the sin and repentance study, was it
Mm-hmm.
like freeing? Did it feel like really intense, or was it like, this is awesome, like I'm learning, I'm growing, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of both. Like, I felt like it was really intense. Like, I remember the cross study being really intense. Like, um, not, we read the physical account. And
Oh
I think
yeah.
that was in
Hmm.
one of those, study booklets or whatever that they did, those first principle booklets. And just
Yep.
being like literally hyperventilating, whimpering, like I couldn't breathe. I was so just blown away that like that could physically happen to a human, and also just completely devastated that, you know, the bad things I had done caused that, and it's, for Jesus to go through that. So it was just, yeah, it was awful.
Well, if you like what you just said in the sin study, that had to have been
Yeah.
hard to feel like these things that I've done, or these little things, or if any,
Yeah.
is what caused him to do this, or what caused him
Right.
to go up there.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
really,
like these little lies, like really, like I lied to my parents, or I cheated on a test, or I stole a lipstick from CVS. He would like die on a cross, like be nailed, like let people nail him to a cross and hang there.
mhm.
And, just, yeah, yeah, it was crazy to think that.
Yeah, it always blows me away that how we would teach them to kids, you know, in that sense. And it's like the way to get to this is through brokenness and that feeling of unworthiness,
Hmm.
and feeling that you're like this terrible person. You
Right.
know, that's something that's hard to reconcile. And as a kid, even in high school, your brains aren't fully formed,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So you went ahead and, you did the studies. And
Yeah.
when did you get baptized?
So this was interesting. I I'm thinking I finished the studies before I turned 17, pretty sure.
Uh,
And my dad, I remember going to my parents saying, like, I've learned all this information. I've hurt God. I want to get baptized. I want to be forgiven. And my dad was like, what are you talking about? You've already been baptized, meaning you were christened when you were an infant. And I said, well, that was a decision you made for me as a baby. And this is a decision I'm making for myself as a teenager who's conscious now of the things I've done that have hurt God. And so I want to make this decision to get baptized. And my dad's like, okay, I can respect that. And so, you can make that adult decision when you're 18 if you want. And I was like, when I'm 18, it's I'm like 16 and 9 months.
oh,
So I remember going back to my team leaders and saying, yeah, so, my dad won't let me get baptized till I'm 18. And, I had always believed, from the studies and everything that, that means I'm lost, right? That means I'm not
yeah.
forgiven. That means if I get into a car accident in the next 15 months, I'm going to go to hell, right? Like that's everything
Geez,
I've
yeah.
learned. Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah. So my team leader said, well, just have to be careful, and you know, do the best you can and, try and live out these principles and put them into action. And yeah, we'll get baptized when you're 18. So that was it. I continued to kind of go to Bible talk and go to church and bring my friends. And, eventually my dad let me go to teen devos, maybe when I was like 17 or 17 and a half. I'm not sure. But like the more I think he saw that it wasn't a phase, because I'm sure that's what he was worried about. Like, this is a phase you're going through, just like teenagers and tweens. I mean, my kids go through tons of phases. They love this thing for 2 months, and they got to buy every, Pokemon card
Hmm.
there is, and then, what's Pokemon, right? And so I
Yeah.
think my
Hmm.
dad thought that this was a phase. And so, yeah, he made me wait. So on my 18th birthday, literally on my 18th birthday, I got baptized.
Oh, there's something I want to go back to, and
Sure.
it said that when you said I hurt God,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that is thrown around a lot. That I think it's thrown around too much with regards to kids
Yeah.
because that's something that I don't, kids, I don't think they can understand. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't even think that's the right approach for anybody to sit here and say, like, the path to salvation is through this understanding that you've hurt someone.
Mm-hmm.
And, but that, like, sitting with that and feeling that, but also knowing that you can't do the thing that's going to take it away,
Mm-hmm.
that had to have been challenging.
Yeah, it was. I mean, in hindsight, what a terrible thing,
Well,
you know, for me to believe, for, you know, me to kind of live with that. Or, I just feel like it perpetuates a lot of guilt, and
it
I think
does.
our
Yeah.
church is infamous for, guilting people into doing things or shaming us into doing things or feeling a certain way so that we can change and never do that again or whatever. I'm saying these things sarcastically. But yeah, so yeah, that sucks. I wasn't aware of that at the time as a 16 or 17-year old, but that's definitely not ever something I want my children to
Mhm.
think or believe. um, yeah.
And what a interesting way to show how someone or something loves, you know?
Hmm.
Like there's things that still it just doesn't connect in my brain.
Yeah.
to think like that is how love is. We're
Right.
taught that, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so you get baptized, and at 18, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you said you couldn't go on dates, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No dates. No, I wasn't, a quote
Oh,
unquote disciple. I wasn't, quote unquote member.
hmm.
So yeah, wouldn't want to, the other 16-year-olds to go out with a sinner. So, um, so I might lead them astray. Yeah, no.
You were a
So
worldly woman.
I was worldly. Oh my,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, no, nope, no dates. Um,
And
yeah.
so what was the baptism like?
Oh my gosh. So it was well this this was kind of sad. I guess I want to say this too because um when I was telling my parents my birthday's coming up, I'm gonna get baptized, and my dad was like, okay, he was like, I want to go. I was like, really? Okay. He's like, but I want to get a suit, because he in his mind he's thinking, it's this, big affair. He needs to be dressed up, what have you. And I remember telling my team leaders, so my dad wants to come, but he wants to get a suit, so we can't do it on my birthday. And I remember my team leader saying, your dad made you put this off for however long. So now you're going to let him make you put it off again. And so I felt, probably a little pressure to definitely get baptized on my 18th birthday. I mean, I don't, at the time, I probably was like, yeah, you're right. I need to do this. Like, on this day, I've been waiting or what have you. Um, so my dad ended up not coming. My sister
Wow.
did come. Yeah, my sister came. Tons of my friends from like high school came. All the team leaders. We had a like a the church in Massachusetts had like a building,
Hmm.
and uh they had a baptistry there. So we got I got baptized there, and I remember this was also like when only men baptized too. So this was like 93. So I can't remember when women started baptizing, but it was, two men. It was like the teen boy who was like the oldest or closest in age to me. And then, um, you know, our Bible talk leader, teen group leader. And yeah, so it was fun. There was a ton of people, lots of celebration. I felt great. But I remember driving home, and I had a like a station wagon, and I always had tons of people in my car, like total illegal, like people laying down in the back with no seatbelts, 7 people in a station wagon and a 5-seater. And I remember my best friend saying, I was driving home and, blaring music and balloons in the back. And she's like, hey, listen, you might be saved, but I'm not sure I am.
Oh,
Just,
jeez.
it was so funny, her saying that like on the way home. And this was my best friend who I, went to Catholic church with, went to CCD with, whose father like was like, screw it, you can take communion, you come here, you're a better kid than anyone else I know. Again, this was like when I was a teenager. But yeah, so it was great. It was a great time, great night. Yeah. So
That's it's interesting. The feeling that only men were baptizing. I don't know if I remember that
yeah.
too much. I remember I can't see that, but what an interesting thought that only men can do this. Like men
Mm-hmm.
are the gatekeepers of every. I mean, that's very much a Christian thing. Men are the gatekeepers of the knowledge, the speaking, the learning,
Right.
uh, and a lot of it I don't think hasn't changed. But what a weird thing. I remember my best friend getting baptized, and I was in his studies, and I did all that stuff, and I'm the one that kind of brought him to church. And I remember I couldn't baptize him. The leader had to baptize him. I remember that being really
Huh.
weird too. There's
Interesting.
always these lines,
Yeah.
this is who gets to do things, this is who doesn't get to do things. When
Oh,
really, I mean, who cares?
right. Because it is so interesting. Like, yes, the man who baptized me was like our, kind of group leader. And I think the boy who baptized me at the time, I mean, I totally know who he is, remember him and things. I think he was the only male teen who was like baptized in my Bible talk. I think the other teen boys who were in my Bible talk were not baptized yet, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Wow. And so your dad wanted to get a suit, and I'm assuming getting a
Hmm.
suit was out of respect for what was about to happen,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. I think so.
And it
Yeah.
wasn't out of an idea of you need to wait longer, I'm trying to stop you. It was out of respect.
Hmm.
And that I think is a wonderful thing
Yeah.
because from what I'm hearing, he was wanting you to take your time, but also he was also very supportive of what you were doing and so it's like it kind of makes me feel a little sad.
I know.
And how did he take it hard, or was he dismissive of it?
Um, oh man, I wish I remember.
Yeah,
I I don't think that he didn't make me feel bad about it, bad
mm,
about not coming and he also was not going to compromise also on wanting to
got it.
wear a suit, and so he really left the decision up to me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. It's tricky though too, because I feel like I was always fairly, I mean, I'm the oldest of three siblings. I was always very independent. Like my parents are very kind of blue collar. You work hard, you do the right thing. I can remember like wanting $10 to go to the movies and I didn't have any babysitting money left, because I had spent it all at CVS on lip gloss or whatever. And him saying, sure, you can borrow $10, but like, what's your plan to pay me back? And I was like, okay, well, I'm babysitting Tuesday night and I'll get paid then and I'll pay you back Tuesday night. And this was from when I was like 14. So like as much as he, wanted, had kind of a lot of control in some ways, he also instilled in me to, like you're a responsible girl, like you can make decisions that make sense for yourself. So I also felt like it really was my choice to get baptized on my birthday because that was something I had said for, 15 months I was going to do.
Wow. I get it.
So,
Yeah.
but do I wish, that I would do things differently and help him feel more a part of that? Because that was also a part of things that, you know, make me get a little emotional. Is that like,
Mm.
um, my parents were never a part of that spiritual part of my life. And it was so important to me for so, so long that I really isolated them from that
Mm.
part of my life, you know, and like I couldn't move out of the house fast enough and, be on my own. Um, and that just isolated me more from them in a lot of ways. Like it separated me more from them because then like I felt like, well, I have this knowledge, I have the Holy Spirit, I have this faith, this church, and you don't. And, that means I'm better than you. I mean, honestly, that is how I felt when I was, you know, a teenager and a young adult.
Yeah.
Shamefully, you know, um, that is what I was taught. That is what I bought into. That is what I believed. And yeah.
That's hard.
Hmm.
I think a lot of us felt isolated from people that weren't in the church. We did a
Hmm.
really good job of making the church our family in a lot of ways,
100%.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, I could see that more and more as I became an adult. Isolation from people and from family in particular. Um, it's hard.
Yeah.
So after you were baptized, um, what was it like? I mean, what was college like? What was like the beginnings of all this? I mean, you made it and
Yeah.
you did it, right?
I know, right?
You're
Yes.
saved.
Right. Hallelujah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I, so that was April 28th, 1993. And then I was going to go to like the state college that was in my town that had a campus ministry. I moved out that summer. So it was like, I graduated high school. And then within like what, 3 or 4 months of my baptism, I moved out and moved into a household with campus girls, basically. And there was like 2 floors of campus girls. And, you know, I remember thinking, I got baptized April 28th, but I didn't really learn how to be a disciple until I moved in with these other women who were also trying to live this Christian life, right? Who
Mhm.
were, um, you know, doing things a certain way, had certain standards. Like I intellectually knew those things from, the studies, but I didn't really practically know what it meant to kind of live as a Christian until I saw other people live that way on a daily basis. But if I
So
thought
that was,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I thought, my teen Christian life was busy, I mean, oh my gosh, once I got to college, it was like, Christianity, it was like, 365, like 24/7, 365,
Oh, yeah.
prayer with your household, every morning at like 6 a.m., going on meeting with people to share your faith, like on campus, Bible talks, devos, Bible studies, church, whatever. It was like all the time, constant.
We always prayed so early in the morning, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
It's always something that I was like, couldn't we do this at like 9 instead of like 6?
Six, right?
You know?
Exactly. Well, we had to accommodate those, 8 a.m. classes, right? You
Yeah, no,
know.
I know. I used to, it was so hard. It was like most of the prayer, it was like, I'm going to pray what I need to pray really fast so that we can move this thing forward because I don't want to fall asleep in this circle of dudes. Because if I fall asleep, then that's going to be real bad.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny.
yeah,
We like I grew up right on the ocean. It was like the ocean was like down the street, 2 houses
yeah,
behind, this household that I live in with girls. And so we would not only were like we weren't praying in our living room, we were like getting out of the house,
oh, yeah.
walking to the water. So you're like getting up at 5 or 5:30 to like, get down to the park to pray there. Sometimes we prayed, as, in our living room with just my roommates or what have you. But yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. We used to pray. I remember having to go climb up Stone Mountain first thing in the morning in Atlanta to try to pray to do the sunrise prayers and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
oh man,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
bringing back lots of feelings, mostly tired feelings.
Right. Exactly. And I,
Um,
I absolutely fell asleep some of those times when we were playing in our living room,
of
for sure.
course. Um, so what was dating like in the beginning?
You know, it was cool. I mean, it was cool. It was also kind of weird, but I also didn't like have like again, being met at 16, being fairly naive in the whole dating world. Like, yeah, I had boyfriends when I was like in high school, but it was like in middle school, but it was like you just talk to them on the phone all the time. I mean, nobody can drive. Like,
Yeah.
where do you go? It's you're not really. dating per se. So
Hmm.
I remember like one, it was weird because it wasn't what I thought dating was. It was more like you're just going to dinner with a friend, but in like a big group. So it was kind of weird, but then you kind of get the hang of it. It's like, okay, this is just, we're calling this a date. And you get to tell your friends and your classmates that you're like going on a date, and they're like, "Ooh, you're going on a date," you know. But
Yeah.
I'm like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's not really like what you think it is. It's very, very pure, you know. Um, so it was, I don't know, it was weird, I guess.
Yeah. So like when you're like in college, I know for me, I mean, all the things that we're doing, I mean, it was so much. Was that challenging balancing all of this? And did your parents see a struggle if there was?
Yeah. So, yeah, like I did not do well academically my first 2 years. So for the first 2 years of college, I was, at this local college in my town. And, I lived right in the same town, but in a different apartment and not in my family's house. It was kind of weird, but I was actually on academic probation my first 2 years. Like I had below a 2.0.
Oh, geez.
So that was not good. You know, I much rather, go and hang out with the disciples, and go to these things, go to these meetings or go to the movies and not study and not do my homework or what have you. I thought I could just get by because I was always like a fairly average student. So I knew I wasn't going to be like a stellar college student, or like I
Mhm.
wasn't going to get a 4.0 or anything. But, academic probation was a bit of a wake up call, I guess. So I think it was my second semester, my sophomore year, I really buckled down. And, um, I'd like wouldn't go home to my apartment until I went to the library and got something done, or, got some homework done or whatever. But yeah, it was hard to juggle.
Mhm.
Um, and then I moved the middle, well, it was like after my sophomore year, I ended up moving to Vermont, where, the ICOC didn't have a church. So I ended up transferring colleges and kind of going on a mission team there. So that was,
Oh, yeah, you went on a mission team in college.
yes, yes.
Wow. What got you to decide to do that?
So there was another guy in our, Bible talking college who ended up going to Romania, on a mission team as well. So it was kind of like my peers were kind of doing this,
Mhm.
there might have been somebody else in our group, but, being so close to Boston, they were sending out a lot of mission teams at this time. So this was like 95, I moved to Vermont. So like 93, 94, 95, like they were sending out a lot of mission teams.
So you're
So
very mission focused. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So I just thought, what the heck, this is pretty close to home. It's only 4 hours away, and why not? And I wasn't doing well at the college I was in, so I thought, well, maybe I'll just transfer and try a different
Ah,
school.
ah.
So yeah.
And how did your parents feel about the choice?
They were not happy. Oh my gosh, it was awful. It was so awful. I remember like deciding I was going to go. I think at the time, if I remember correctly, you kind of said you wanted to go. You kind of went to these meetings and then you were like chosen or approved. I don't really remember how it all went down, but remember like I didn't tell them until I knew that I was going to go on the
Wow.
mission team.
Hmm.
So I remember telling them, like going home, it was like I was going home after church one day. Oh my gosh, it was awful. My sister and my brother, who again are younger, my sister's like 2 years younger, my brother's like 7 years younger. So at the time, I was 20, my sister was 18, my brother was probably, I don't know, 12 or 13, I guess. And I just remember saying, like, I'm going to go on a mission team. I'm going to move to Vermont. And my dad was like, what are you talking about? Like, your church is right here. I said, I know, but there isn't one in Vermont. He's like, there's tons of churches in Vermont. Like, what are you talking about? Like, still not kind of like understanding like, we're the only church, we're the one church, we have to have our church and other,
Yeah. Mhm.
anyway. So like, I probably tried to explain that to him in, them. And I just remember my mom saying, um, I hope you never know what it feels like to lose a child. And I was
Jeez.
like, oh, like I can't believe I'm like, what am I doing? Like
Mhm.
maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't go to Vermont, And again, going back to my leaders or whatever, they're like, why would you let your family have that much control over you? Like you're a grown up. You want to do this, you can do this. Um, and eventually being like, you're right. I need to do this, or God needs me to do this, or but it was awful. It was I don't know how much I saw my family before I left, but I don't think it was a lot. I think I avoided them because I felt terrible when I told them, and that also felt like my mom's overreacting. What does she mean? She's losing a
Yeah.
child. Moving 4 hours away. You're not losing me. Yeah, it was my
And I bet it
sister.
was
Yeah,
I bet it was challenging for them to reconcile because it's not like you're like, no, I just really like this school. There's opportunities here. It's like a church. So they're already like,
yeah,
this is interesting. This or not interesting, like I don't understand this.
right.
Um, and it's interesting how like when you were a teen, they were like, respect your father's wishes. But now that you're in
Yeah,
college, they're like, why don't they want you to do this? That must, nope,
yeah,
you're an adult, you can do whatever you want. And I mean, on one hand, sure, I get it, but on the other hand, it's like, why don't you just sit with it for a second and see how
yeah,
maybe take some more time.
yeah,
But you moved to Vermont. You moved to Vermont. Why was that hard to say? Vermont.
yeah.
And what was that like being on a mission team?
That was exciting. I mean, it was the, Burlington, Vermont is so different than, where I grew up in Massachusetts. It's so much beautiful, like absolutely beautiful. The mountain, Adirondack
Yeah,
Mountains were gorgeous. The lake was gorgeous. The campus was so different. Like the UVM campus was so different than the school, I was used to. Um,
yeah, I love Vermont as
it,
well. It's a beautiful
yeah.
place.
Oh, it's just
Yeah.
amazing. But again, it was, if I thought we had, a booked schedule when I was in Massachusetts, I mean, going on a mission team and being in college, it was even crazier, I mean, we were together all the time,
Hmm.
doing stuff all the time, again, like I ended up just going to the community college for the first 2 years, and I retook those classes I didn't do so well in at my first college to boost my GPA. And then I reapplied or applied to UVM and transferred in a couple years later. So I got my associate's degree in the meantime. So part of that was like I need to prove to my parents like I really am like serious about college. I really am gonna still do this thing. Church is just one part of my life. Um, but really, it was consuming my life.
Yeah. Going on a mission team in our church was like, that was such a thing. You know,
Yeah.
I can remember the mini KNN videos
Yeah.
we would watch, and you're just hearing of these church plantings and people going with just a suitcase or two and uprooting their
Mm-hmm.
entire life and just moving God's kingdom. Um,
Yeah.
that must have felt at some point a little bit exciting.
Oh my gosh. Super, super exciting. And there's also like this, I mean, I hate to say this, but there's like this little ego boost of like, you must be a super Christian because you get
Sure.
to go on,
Yeah. Hmm.
you get to go on a mission team. Um, so there was a little bit, of kind of bad pride in negative pride in that way. But I didn't, looking back on it, at the time, I just thought, well, these people are awesome. So.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I think that there is definitely it was like there's people who can do those things and there's people who can't, and I'm one of the
Right.
people who can't, you know.
Mm,
So
yeah. Yeah.
to just that idea, you know.
Mm, sure.
Um, so what was it? I mean, was it church planning? Was it great? Was it everything you thought it was going to be?
Um,
What was life
yeah.
like?
Yeah. I mean, it was, Vermont's such an interesting place, right?
Yeah.
Um, it- People are not into Christianity in Vermont, really. I don't think, or at least that wasn't my experience. Like people weren't, people are, they worship the creation and not the creator, right? They're not
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
who made this, and we're more like, oh, God is amazing. He made these mountains and this beautiful lake and blah blah blah, all the stuff we get to see. But people just weren't really that interested. Like even now, however many years later, I mean, what, almost 30 years later. I mean, the church is still like probably 20 to 40 people. Like it was never going to be a huge church, but we didn't know that at the time. We thought,
Hmm.
our goals were like, we're going to grow it by, 20 and 40 and 70 or whatever it was. And it just, that didn't happen. Um, Not to say we didn't have like baptisms and people studying the Bible and, lots of visitors coming to like Bible talks and campus things or whatever. But for whatever reason, it just wasn't ever going to be huge, you know?
Was that
Um,
hard? Like, did you feel pressure from
yeah,
people and leadership and stuff?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of pressure to like, I can't remember which one of your guests it was, but like I remember listening to one of your previous podcasts, and like people were saying, if they went to someone said if they came to a Bible talk and there were no visitors, like they either prayed or they went out and shared their faith. And I remember
Yeah.
doing those
Hmm.
very things, like or feeling afraid to go to Bible talk without somebody with us, like almost like that wasn't allowed, you know. Um, and it felt awful. Like it just felt
Hmm.
terrible, like I didn't do my job or I'm hurting God, letting God down, having these feelings or, hearing people say these things and feeling really guilty. And yeah, it was,
Yeah.
that was hard.
It was very much a numbers game,
Yeah.
and that pressure because yeah, it's like it's not just that you don't have people at church, it's like God knows that you haven't brought people to church. That feeling of God seeing you and hurting God and feeling that it's hard to reconcile, and it's hard to not make it. It's honestly it just makes it more than it is because it's really just I don't want to say it's not that big a deal, but it's like I mean it's hard. And it
Yeah.
should be okay that it's hard and it's okay that it's slow and it's okay that it doesn't. But for us, you'd watch these KNN videos or you'd hear these stories of people planting and we're already at 150 members and stuff like that. And it's just so intense.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, so how long were you out in the church plant team or how long were you in Vermont for?
So I was there, I think it was 8 years. It was no, 95 to 2002, so 7.
Okay.
So I, uh, finished my undergrad, stayed there for grad school, and then met my husband and I started dating when I was in grad school, and he lived in Connecticut.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and he's 4 years older, and he was already kind of, graduated college, had a job. And
Mm.
so when I finished grad school and we were still dating, I was like, well, let me back up. Thinking I would have loved for him to come to Vermont. And I think he would have loved to come to Vermont. And I think Vermont really needed more people. But because I was a woman, you follow the
Uh-huh.
man, right? Like that was
Yeah.
what
Hmm.
we taught. And I remember the leaders in Vermont at the time really like pushing back and fighting for Scott to come and for me to stay, and then be basically being told like, no, she's the woman, she moves. And I didn't question it, shamefully. And
Hmm.
uh yeah.
Well, such a, I mean, men leading. I think what really needed to happen and needs to happen in a lot of these situations is like what's best for the two of them. Like
Mhm.
that's the conversation,
Mhm.
but it adds such a level of just that hierarchy that just doesn't need to be there. Like, and it's terrible in the sense that it's like how normal that is, how normal that was, and it kind of still is in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's crazy because it's like it was our relationship and we didn't even talk about those things, right?
What
It
do you
was
mean you
like
didn't
the
talk about those things?
oh my gosh, I it makes me sick how legalistic our dating relationship was.
Yeah.
We lived 4 hours away. We had a date, I want to say once a month. We took turns going to each other's, like we'd meet halfway, or I'd come to Connecticut, he'd come to Vermont. And we talked once a week for
That was it.
I don't even know if it was a half an hour, but literally, I swear to God, he was watching the clock to like end the call right at whatever time our call was supposed to be over.
And who decided that for you guys? Was it
Oh,
y'all or
oh no, it wasn't, didn't, no, I would have talked to him forever, but no, that was like absolutely the rule. Whoever the disciplers were, whoever the leaders were, no, you talk for 1 hour.
is it 1 hour and 1 minute? You know what's going to happen.
Oh my gosh, look out, watch
Then
out.
here comes
Sin.
the devil. He's waiting for
Woo,
that because 1 hour is too much.
too
Before
much,
you know it,
yes.
you guys are going to be talking about things you shouldn't talk about.
Oh.
Then you're going to get in the car and you're going to drive to wherever it is, and it's just going to, you know,
Oh, heck's gonna break loose. Right.
yeah. It's so funny to think because for about 3 months, no, for 6 months of my relationship with my now wife, um, we were long distance.
Oh,
I
okay.
still had I still had time in my to graduate. She had already graduated and she was starting her practice. She's a chiropractor to where we now live and stuff like that. And I mean, I would have lost it if I was like once a week we get to talk.
I know.
Now, if
It
there's
was
extenuating circumstances, I understand. Like there's things like some people, they move. It's like if you're in the military or you're all these things, like that's just how it is. And it sucks and you get through it or you don't. But like once again, like we talked about what we needed in this time in this relationship to grow, and that's what we did.
right, right. Yeah, I feel like we never talked about anything real. Like that was important to know about one another.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like, and then you get married and you're like, oh my gosh, I literally know, how did I not know this about you? Like you
Yeah.
go from nothing to everything the
Yeah.
next day, like in one day. And I do. And it's just like, oh, terrible. I mean, talk about anxiety provoking. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Just, and or like, oh my gosh, who did I marry? Like, how did I not know this about you? Or whatever. I mean, I'm sure he felt some of the same things. But yeah, it is not the way I think dating should happen. I mean, it's
Yeah.
awful.
We're sold this narrative and this idea that once you get married, it'll all work itself out.
Yeah,
And that's just not the case.
no, it's not the case.
And you need to have conversations and you need to talk and you need to like grow together and get close and become intimate. And
Mm-hmm.
intimacy is more than like you hear intimate. And I know like as a kid, the first thought I had was sex, but really
Right.
intimacy is like a closeness. It's a building of the relationship. And
100%.
it's important.
Yeah,
And so many of
absolutely.
us and so many other people, they just, because of the rules and people's ideas, they, you know, they do it that way. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, you hear about it, the results of that, and the divorce and the
Mm-hmm.
depression and all of those things that come from that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. And did you say that the people didn't really want you to date him? That he wasn't like leadership material? Was that a thing?
Yeah, that was so this is interesting. So we first went on a date, I want to say in, he knows these dates better than me, like 96 or 97. And I remember I was like whatever, like Bible talk leader or whatever the term was at the
Ooh.
time. I don't even know. And I remember the leaders saying, I don't think he's really right for you. Like, we don't see his trajectory the same as yours,
Yeah.
spiritually, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, I don't really like him. So we had gone on like probably like 3 or 4 dates. He was coming to Vermont all of those times. And I remember like, oh my gosh, like I knew it was the night I was going to tell him that I didn't like him. Like I knew it was like that night. I get to like this, like the brother's house where the, date was going to happen. And he gives me this gift, this like, I get there and there's this like giant package and inside of it, oh my gosh, it was like one of those fountain things. I don't even know if people have them anymore. I think they've morphed into like different, they look very different now, but it was like this little cottage that was a lighthouse and you turned it on and then there was like these stairs and it would
Oh,
suck up the water and the water would fall down. Oh my gosh. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you so much. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to have to break his heart at the end of the day.
mm,
And he
I can
just gave
remember
me
those
this.
fountains all over the place in the 90s.
Yes, yes,
You'd go to, I think first time I saw one was in this store in the mall called Natural Wonders.
yes,
It's just very tranquil,
yes.
very peaceful, and everyone had them on the desk, or there'd be one on a coffee table in a lobby or something. Wow. Your story is very 90s. I like it. We started at the
Yeah.
mall. We're back to something like 90s-esque.
Yes.
So, but really, so okay, I just want to back. So if he lives 4 hours away, how did you meet him?
So, we would do, since Vermont was so small and New England's pretty small,
Yeah. Hmm.
we would do these campus retreats
Oh
at
yeah.
this like
Okay.
ski lodge in New Hampshire. And so all of the kind of Boston and New England campus ministries would go. So one of my roommates met one of his roommates or
Uh,
good friends or whatever and he wanted to take this other guy wanted to take my roommate on a date. And he's like, well, I'm going to bring my friend. Can you hook him up on a date with your friend? So that's how it was, just like a double date. Um, yeah.
Cool.
So,
That makes sense. Yeah, we did a
yeah.
lot of those retreats and a lot of those like conferences, states getting together, stuff like that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so like it's just interesting how, you know, our church was very structured and it was structured in so many ways that kept you very isolated around people just like you, right? So like campus
Mm-hmm.
hung out with campus, teens hung out with teens, singles hung out with singles,
Mm-hmm.
marrieds hung out with marrieds, but even with marrieds, it was young marrieds, it was older marrieds, and then it would just like go up, 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 up. And then it was the same thing with leaders. Like leaders only dated people that were leaders or people that deemed could be a leader,
Right.
right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
so much, I think for the structure with regards to being around people just like you, I think gave you a very surfacey understanding of life because I think that we need to be around older people and younger people. You know, I think that's
Yeah.
like wisdom comes from being around people who've been through it. But then also like I think it was a one of my books I was reading, a Richard Rohr book where he talks about how you should have someone in your life older than you and someone in your life younger than you because it just gives you perspective in both ways, you know.
Yeah.
And we just didn't have that as much as I think we should have had. But just that idea of it's just control, you know,
Right.
and
Right.
it's masked as we're just looking out for you with regards to like the dating thing though. You know, we want you to stay the leader and he's not leadership material and stuff like that. So,
Right. Right.
but
Yeah. And it's, oh, sorry.
no, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I
Well,
was
it's
gonna.
interesting, you're talking about the experience and the different generations and the wisdom that comes from that and things. It's interesting, the leaders of the mission team at the time who, I got this, advice from, they were only 4 years older than me. Like they were recent college graduates themselves, right? So there wasn't really, you know, um, somebody kind of older and more experienced saying,
Mhm.
yeah, you know, he's not really leadership material or what have you. So
But he gave you the beautiful fountain and you didn't
gave
break
me,
his heart.
no, I did. Oh, I
Oh,
did.
you did?
I did.
Oh,
I did. And I, told him, sorry, but I don't like you in that way. You're welcome to keep coming here, but I just want you to know, like, this relationship's not going to go any further.
oh,
And so,
geez. What happened to
so
the
he,
fountain?
oh, I had it. We brought it into our marriage. I don't even, we recycled it at some point along the way, but, no, we had it for a while. But yeah, so he disappeared for like 9 months and I moved to like, so this is so interesting. The couple who was leading the church at the time in Vermont, they ended up moving to Connecticut and got to know him and were in his area during the time, like after I had told him, I don't like you. So he found me on campus like 9 months later. I had moved to a different dorm, lived, had a different phone number. And like he found me and like the phone rang and, I answered and it was him. And like as soon as I heard his voice, I felt like I felt nervous. I felt my heart get excited. I,
Yeah,
was like really had missed his friendship. And um, we talked definitely longer than an hour.
you sinners.
I know. But listen, oh, did we sin? So at the end of the call, he says, I love you. And I was like,
Jeez.
I love you
Wow.
too. Like I said, I love you too without even like thinking. I don't know that like at the time I meant like I love you in an intimate way, but like I love you. I missed your friendship these 9 months. Like you really were a giver, you were a faithful friend, you were not selfish, you know, asked me about me and seemed to, just all those things. So anyway, so eventually, he wanted to go on another date. Oh, wait. No, he came up for my college graduation. That's right, because it was during, yeah, it was right before my college graduation. And he came up, met my family, went to my graduation party.
Oh,
Yeah. So then it kind of took off from there. Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. But you
He
know what's
defied
crazy?
the leaders.
We
He
did.
just,
We did. Yeah, we did. However, when I when he started calling me again and coming to my graduation and like asking me on a date, I went back to the leaders who, the wife is one of my very best friends to this day. Um, you know, she like I really wanted her opinion. I'm like, years ago you told me like he wasn't the one for me. Like, what do you think now? Now that you've been living in the same state as him, you worship with him, you're in the same ministry, blah blah blah. And she's like, you know, basically was like, I'm sorry, like I prejudged him, like I listened to what other people said, but now that I know him and see him, she's like, he's such a servant, he's involved in the music ministry. He is a leader. He's just a leader in a different way than you are, like maybe I think what they were like I was more confident with people or more like sure of myself maybe, and he was maybe more like artsy and maybe a little more introverted or kind of goofy and like not as like outwardly confident or what
Mhm.
have you. I don't know. But yeah, so she, you know, I valued her opinion. And she said, I think he's a good guy. I was like, okay, maybe I'll give him another chance. And I did. And, here we
And
are.
it's awesome.
Yeah.
I
So,
gotta pause for just a second, okay?
sure. Yeah.
We are back.
Okay. I forget
So,
where we left off.
so you end up getting married and everything's great and wonderful. And I remember you mentioning earlier before we recorded about how your relationship didn't fit the narrative
Yeah.
and the
Yes.
struggles with that.
Yeah. So, to kind of go along with that whole theme of like, the men are the leaders and all that, obviously that was perpetuated, continued to be perpetuated. And I have his permission to say this. Um, he's not a natural leader, right? So I think there was this pressure on him. One, there was this pressure on him to be somebody he wasn't, to be the leader, to lead the marriage, to lead the family, to, blah, 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 make decisions, be the man or whatever. And then there was pressure on me to submit to his leadership when he wasn't necessarily all the time leading. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? Or he didn't have strong opinions about, oh, we should definitely do this or we should definitely do that. Like he would be fine with taking my suggestion or doing what I thought or, and you know, I don't think I always realized what a problem that was until we went to like marriage retreats. Like you go to marriage retreats and they're like, you know, very much the male is the leader. The male is the one with the sex drive and the one who initiates and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, well, if that's not how it works in my house, in my bedroom, then what's wrong with us? Right.
Yeah. Of course.
That would make me feel bad. That would make him feel bad. Like we were less than, like we were weird. Like, yeah. And like sometimes I would find like one woman who was brave enough to share that that's not really how it works in my house, or, and we would be like off in a corner. Okay, tell me, like, what should you do? What do we do? Like, is there something wrong with our husbands? It was just crazy. It was like crazy making.
Yeah, it's there was a former guest on here a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about that, the roles. We had very clearly defined roles and expectations of what we were supposed to be doing, how we were supposed to show up.
Yeah,
And when you didn't show up in a certain way, then people don't know what to do with you, and they make you feel that something's wrong with you.
right,
And I think the problem with that is that when they say lead, it's really control,
right,
but it's really
100%.
lead this way. It's
Right,
not lead, be a
right,
loving, supportive, providing father, husband, whatever. It's you are the first and last decision maker,
hmm
and you have to show up this way, and then your wife has to do this, and this, and this. And
hmm
that's the way. But then they throw in this is how God designed it. This is how God, designed marriage,
right,
which is very troubling because we are all different people that bring different things to the table
right,
at all the time.
100%. Yeah, it was, you know, I grew up in a family of like my grandfathers are grandfathers, uncles, carpenters, builders, fix-it people. My dad remodeled our house. My mom helped them. They built, my parents like built the whole interior of their like vacation home in Maine, everything. So I was learning those things, right? I was learning how to build things, fix things, install things, and unfortunately my husband's father was disabled from the time he was like in late elementary school in a wheelchair because he had an accident at work. So he didn't have a father or an adult figure who was handy. He didn't learn to be handy. That's okay. Not all men need to be handy. But like I can just, I'm a strong girl. Like my husband is maybe not as strong. That's okay. He's fine with it. I'm fine with it. It doesn't matter. So, but it's like people made us feel like they would say things. Oh my gosh, I friggin' hate this statement, but they would say, oh, I'm gonna pull my man card on you. Like, what does that even mean? Like,
Mhm.
that means you're not masculine enough, right? Like my husband's not masculine enough. It's just it's warped. It's not
It is. And you end up spending time and energy forcing yourself into something that you're not designed to be.
right.
And all that does is bring hurt and shame and guilt.
Yeah.
I was
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, my family showed me a different way as well because my mom grew up on a farm.
Mm.
My mom grew up breaking horses.
Yeah.
So she's a tough chick.
Yeah.
And like she could do a lot of things. She was a very capable lady. My dad was capable in so many other different ways that balanced it out for our family. He was an incredible baker, an incredible cook. He was incredibly creative and sensitive and nurturing. And that was that's how he was raised. So I'm seeing that it really doesn't, I saw a marriage working and I saw a father providing in different ways that still protected, cared, and supported us. But then at the same time, you would go to church, or because in society that's what we're told. In society, this is how it's supposed to be. But in the church, you're hoping it's going to be different because it's supposed
Right.
to be different, but then it's not. So
Right.
you hear these lessons and these things, and it's like, it's something wrong with my family. It's something wrong with the fact that I want to hang out with kids and do
Mm-hmm.
this and
Right.
not be this super machismo
Right.
dude.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's hard and it's damaging
Yeah.
because masculinity, I think, is whatever it is for the person.
Right.
It really doesn't, it doesn't need to be like, I don't know, it's cookie cutter. We're not cookie cutter.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Yep.
that's got to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I think it caused a lot of friction with us, like even like with the kids and me saying like you need to do family devos, and you're not doing family devos. And then at some point I was like, oh, screw it, I'm going to do family devos. Or if I want to teach the kids some scriptures, or if I want the kids to learn XYZ or memorize this, that, or the other, then I'm just going to teach them, and like I should have just done those things, not made him feel badly about you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Um, and he was fine with it and I was fine with it, So it's like, or sometimes I would be pissed off that he wasn't doing what the church said he should be doing as a man.
Yep.
So that definitely came up. Probably still comes up, but yeah.
We gave them so much power over our
Mm,
lives,
yeah.
over our thoughts, what the world, how we made the world up and our realities,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, who cares who the mouthpiece is? If the mouthpiece is showing love, support, caring, and
Exactly.
there, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like we all have our gifts, right? So
Yeah.
just use your gifts, whatever that is, whatever
Mhm.
thing it is that you contribute. So if I'm the one who fixes the toilets, great. You know, I'll fix the
Yeah.
toilets. And, you have the flexibility to take the kids to school, take the kids to school. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It,
It shouldn't matter. And I think, I don't know,
yeah.
I'm talking about it more now, or I'm getting on a soapbox just because like for my relationship, our roles have shifted where like I quit my job 2 years ago.
Mm,
Um, to pursue this and to pursue a couple other things. But as I'm building this and writing the book and all these things, like I'm at home. So my role now is the home. And as my wife is, you know, off doing her thing and like running her, her chiropractic offices that she has, like I'm doing the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, these things. And it's like I'm showing up for the family in the way that I can right now, and I'm supporting. And at the same time, there's that thing in the back of my head that's like, this is not how it's supposed to be.
hmm
Even though how it's supposed to be is up to my wife and I, and it's working and it's great and it's wonderful.
Right.
But
Right.
it just, it's challenging.
Yeah. And you know what I think too is like we, because this is the defined roles that the church sets or what have you, it also didn't allow, like, we didn't talk about the things, we didn't distribute roles. We just assumed because this is a quote unquote manly thing, you're going to do this. Or this
Yeah.
is a quote unquote wifely feminine thing, you're going to do this. And we never talked about it. We just will like have a blow up about something or, and it's like, well, wait, why do you have to do that if that's really, I'm better at that? Like we did that for so long. We just,
Yeah.
yeah,
Such unneeded stress.
yes, yes.
So So you're in the church, you're here. It's been a it's been a few years now. And you're not a member now. So when did
Mhm.
things really start to get weird for you?
I would say during the pandemic is when, things got kind of weird for me. Um, what was that, like 2020?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're doing this thing virtual, you know, at first you're like, oh, I gotta, do all these online meetings or whatever we're doing, or record this message that can be shared at church or whatever, or, lead this kids kingdom class that's virtual and teach this lesson and figure it out or what have you. Um, but then like there was a lot of, the political unrest, the racial tension in our country. And I just started to see a lot of, like, I think when people are behind a screen, they're a lot freer, right?
Mm-hmm.
To say what they really want to say, or like their true selves kind of come out. And I just saw a lot of just ugliness, hate and divisiveness. And it was kind of like, I I liked it better when I didn't know who you voted for. Like we never talked about that, you know what I mean, type of thing. But now you're like speaking up about XYZ or these, different injustices that were happening. And you're also starting to, I feel like I never really examined those things about myself either. Like, what do I really believe about, you know, racial justice, and what do I really believe about, LGBTQ issues, and what do I really think about politics? I didn't really think about those things, shamefully. Like they just were not part of my consciousness on the regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to have some more thoughts and feelings, and they maybe weren't the popular opinion. And um, I also recognize that, man, this church is such an elitist group of people who thinks that we're the only ones who know, like the
Mm-hmm.
way to salvation, or we're the only ones who know um, the answers, or this is like the only church. Like I know that I heard those things for, 25 years, 30 years, or whatever, but I became more aware of it during that time that we were separate. And, just felt like I'm not really buying all this.
Mm-hmm.
Or these are not the things I want to teach my kids. I do not want my kids to have these narrow views, these exclusive views and principles. I don't like this. And I just was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not gonna be I can't in good faith, be associated with this group that ostracizes people, or that, or is playing God. Like you're not God. People, a church, are not God. And we acted as if we were. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe they still act as if they are, because I'm not there, so I can't speak to it. But um we did way too much speaking and interpreting for God.
Yeah. Mhm. It is interesting what you said earlier about the screen and what that does to people, like being
Mm-hmm.
behind a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's this freedom because you're not necessarily in front of them
Right.
physically. They can say something and there's not anything you can really do about it,
Right.
which is challenging. I mean, it's even worse on a message board or a comment section because you
Right.
don't see the person at all.
Right.
Um,
Right.
And it's come up a few times here about how things were during like the 2020, 2021 with regards to
Yeah,
conversations that necessarily weren't happening
right,
that should have been happening, you know.
right,
And instead of a church being a place where we could really talk about this, it was a place where we better not talk about this,
right, right,
you know, with everything that we were seeing.
right. And or like that, and I think like the leaders of the church here in Connecticut were trying to have those conversations to their credit, but if they're trying to change things, but like the membership of 250 people or more are not buying into that, like narrative changing, then like they're trying to progress, trying to move the conversation along. The wife is very, is a very strong, independent person. Her husband, like, totally lets her, like, lead and do various things. Like, and, but if the congregation is saying, what are you doing? No, we're not changing. We're not going down this road. We're not having these conversations. Then what do you do? You know?
It's sad because it's just people just get locked into their ideas
Mm-hmm.
and that's all they want.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, like we really, people criticize us for being brainwashed. I think we're brainwashed. I think that people are
sure.
brainwashed into a certain narrative, a certain, these teachings that, were incorrect, and but they don't want it to change, right? They don't want to hear a new teaching. They don't want to hear a new perspective.
Yeah, there's a comfortability that comes from the idea that you know what's right
Mm-hmm.
and how the world should work. I think there's also an entitlement, and it's challenging to hear that, you know, for some people, I'm not saying it's just, well, it's just challenging to hear that, like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be the sole leader for this in the relationship. Maybe women should be speaking up more, and it freaks people out. But like, I don't know. I think we need to be more open and curious. And it's like what ends up happening, and I was speaking about this yesterday with someone who actually will be the episode before yours, where the conversation just goes, well, you're you're welcome to leave, right? You're welcome to just walk away. And they think that that's a loving kind approach when it's basically saying, screw you and your ideas. And instead of us being in a place where like we can talk and critique or ask questions or try to gain an understanding, it's like, no, this is how I think, and you can think what you think over there.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we've become in a lot of ways as a
Right.
society, and it just leads into the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's the same with like I know you mentioned you had issues with how things were handled with like the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah, one, I was in Vermont, right? I don't know what the population of LGBTQ population is in Vermont, but it's like, why are we, who are we to say how people can or can't live, who they can or can't love? Like that is not our place, right? I mean, I just feel like that's absolutely ridiculous. Not to mention, you know, this whole like masculine thing, that males have to be masculine. Well, you know, I have a son, I have twin boys, and one of them is very much into the theater. One of them is super athlete, loves sports, is definitely more quote unquote masculine, right? And the other one is loves theater, art, music, you know, does not have an athletic bone in his body, super clumsy. We did occupational therapy forever with him. You know, they're both amazing. And I want them to both go down the path they want to go down. One of them He wants to wear pink and purple Crocs. Great. Wear pink and purple Crocs. Sign me up. I'll take you to the store to get them. You know, I don't want him to hear the message that whoever you choose to be, whatever you choose to like, whoever you choose to love is not okay, is wrong, is sinful, or whatever. Because I don't believe that.
Hmm.
Did I believe that at one point? Was I, potentially brainwashed to believe that at one point? Yeah, I did. Did I espouse that? Did I, say that to other people? I did. I do not agree with that anymore. Um, and I don't want my kids to be in an environment where they hear that. And they would hear that in our church.
Yeah. Hmm.
And, I don't want them to, there's so many pressures on our kids today. This place that's supposed to be safe and bring us joy, it's not a safe place for everybody. It's a safe
No,
place
it's not.
if you fit into a certain mold and you believe these certain things, then it's safe. But if you are anywhere like off the narrow path, if you have any kind of different belief or whatever, heaven forbid, it's not safe for you.
Yeah. No, it's true. Unfortunately, that's how it is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good that to hear your story with regards to the timing of it, because a lot of times you hear, I just, that this was then, it's not now
Right.
with the church. And I think it's because a lot of times you'll hear people say, like, well, why do we need to keep talking about this?
Mm.
Like the letter came out or whatever, and the church changed. And it's like, well, no, it's still kind of happening
Right.
in that sense.
Yeah.
Um, so when you left, I mean, was it like a fast, like an overnight leaving, or was it just kind of a slow burn?
I think it was probably like a natural slow burn in the sense of we were already not meeting together physically. So, and we were already like not even seeing each other because of COVID, right? Like,
Mhm.
I remember, I was seeing my neighbors and the moms at my kids' school way more than I was seeing the church, right? Because kids were back in school. We were figuring out how to do that, but we still hadn't figured out how to meet together physically at church, right? So it just kind of naturally, slowly happened, like I was feeling some feelings and having some attitudes about, not really wanting to be so, you know, exclusive or not including people or what have you. And um, feeling like this area of my life is not bringing me joy. Like this Christianity, church, or whatever. This is the most. At some point, it became the most stressful area of my life. Whether it was because I felt differently, I was starting to have different beliefs and feelings, and or like, are these people really my friends? Because I've never seen them like that here. Or I never.
We're back. Could you repeat what you had just said about it was we were talking about the leaving and like coming back to
Yeah, it was like I would say it was slow. I left kind of slowly and um because I wasn't seeing people at church physically
Mhm.
and I was seeing neighbors and friends more and I just decided it wasn't really what I believed anymore, you know? And I hadn't heard from anybody in a long time. I didn't understand why the kids could go to school and I could go to work, but we still couldn't go to church. It was just kind of strange.
Hmm. And so what was life like not having the church in your life?
At first it was well, and let me just say too, my husband still goes. He's still very active. So that's a whole
Okay.
nother, you know, situation. But at first it was strange. Like he was getting up and going to church, and I was like, see ya later, Um, and that was kind of weird. There were definitely times where I cried and mourned and said, oh my gosh, like I gave, whatever, how many years, 32 years of my life. This is what I did for 32 years, or um, every Sunday and Wednesday and whatever. So it was weird. Um, I've tried to check out like other churches, but mm, I think I'm not ready. Like, I think I'm not even ready to go down like the God path or the spiritual path. I feel like there's still um,
Mm.
too much that's just not worked out in my head yet or my heart about what I even think or believe or about these things.
It's kind of,
Um,
is it
yeah.
challenging to have him still go there? Or
I mean, yes and no. I want him to do what he wants to do. He's an individual person. He needs to do what he wants to do. Um, but yes, it's challenging in the way that like I think he has a little bit of false hope that like he's gonna share something with me and invite me to something, and I'm like, I don't want to go. Like it's I'm happy to hear what you learned or what you're thinking, but it doesn't change how I feel. Or sometimes he'll say things like, what does he say? Like, will you just like cut these people out of your life? I'm like, my phone is not ringing. I didn't cut anybody out of my life. You know, like
yeah,
relationships are a two-way street. And I remember talking to one of the girls who was like in my family group, and I just said, you know what? We're not really friends, like, and I don't feel bad about saying that. Like, our kids go to different schools. We live in different towns. We were friends because we went to the same church, but like we didn't do anything together outside of church, like a church activity. So
yeah,
were we really friends? I have a ton of friends. Like I have a very busy life. I have tons of neighbors, tons of mom friends from school. My sister lives up the street. Like I don't really need any more friends who expect me to be a certain way or expect me to do a certain thing for them.
yeah. Hmm.
Like, yeah. So,
Yeah, you had mentioned that you can't separate the church from God.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like having a hard time with that, right?
Hmm.
Because, I think I said a little bit earlier, I feel like the church, they were God or they were like God in our lives, right? And I just am having a hard time. Like I never really had a relationship with God like I saw some other people. You know what? I know that sounds like terrible because everybody has their own individual relationship with God, but I never felt like I was as like spiritual as other people spoke. Right? I don't know
Hmm.
if that's
No,
that
that's yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that some of us, me included, felt that there were how people had their relationship with God always seemed better than mine. Like it seemed like they were getting it easier than I was,
yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of thing. Mhm.
Right. Like maybe it's a comprehension problem I have I don't know.
Or they were just really good at how they talked about it.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah. Um, yeah.
so like what do you think you would say to someone now that's left as like something that like hope or healing, a message that you would say to someone?
Yeah. I think you know, these little things that gnaw on you, over the years. Like you have to listen to those things. I wish I had listened sooner, whether it be the gender role stuff, whether it be the, you know, social issues that you're concerned about or want to get more involved with. And the church is like, no, we don't get involved in politics or causes or what have you. Um, but I also think it's so important to have a life outside the church.
Mm.
And I feel like that was so discouraged for so long. Like, definitely before I had kids, I did not have a life outside the church. And then I had kids, and it's like, oh, your life becomes a little different because now you have people who need you to take care of them. And having twins is, you know, on another level. Um, but I'm so grateful. I feel like my exit was a lot less painful potentially because I had a life outside the church. Like, I was very involved in the kids' sports. I coached, my son's soccer team. I was involved in the PTA at school. I, do other activities. I have these moms that we get together and, have girls' nights and dinners and bonfires and whatever. Like, I I had something outside the church, but I think a lot of people don't. And so I would just like encourage people, you have to find other passions or other things that you believe in or other causes or groups, that you want to get involved with. And I think that really kind of lessened the impact of me leaving, really. Um,
That's wonderful thoughts. I definitely agree. I think it's
yeah,
important to share, especially your thought about the little things that gnaw at you. Like, don't ignore
yeah.
them.
Don't ignore those things. Yes.
Mhm.
Like, speak up. And if you speak up and it's not heard, like, that's a sign. Like, if you're in a space where people don't value your opinion or that your opinion is not valid, right? Or it's invalidated, right? Because it's not the opinion or the thought of the group, right? That's a problem. We're all smart individuals with our own brain, right? And we need to have more autonomy to make decisions that are right for us and our families. And I don't think that we're necessarily taught to do that in church.
No, I agree. In a lot of ways, we're taught to sit down and listen, and shove yourself into the mold, however you can
Right,
get in there. Hmm.
right, right. And if your thought or feeling is not in
Hmm.
line with this, shove it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jocelyn, what do you think? We were in a cult?
Yes, I think we were. I think we
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, for coming on and being open and vulnerable, honest, and sharing your story. I hope it's
Thank
leading you
you.
a little bit closer to your healing.
Thank you so much. It does. Thank
Oh,
you. I appreciate it.
no, thank you. And thank all of you for your continued support of this podcast and this growing conversation that is We Were in a Cult. If you remember the ICOC or the ICC and would like to come and share your story, you can reach out to me at clemenswithaz@gmail.com, or you can direct message me on the Clemens with a Z Instagram page. If you'd like to support the podcast, some of the easiest ways you can do that is by rating and reviewing, subscribing, and also just sharing this with your friends, people that you think would want to hear it. If you'd like to support the podcast financially, you can go to the GoFundMe link that will be here in the show notes or at the Instagram page, and you can donate. And as always, thank you guys for all of this. And I'm not the channel, I'm just a source. Peace.